That Lass of Lowrie's by Francis Hodgson Burnett. Chapter 12. Though they saw comparatively little of each other, the friendly feeling established between Annice and Joan in their first interview gained strength gradually as time went on. Coming home from her work at noon or at night, Joan would see traces of Annice's presence and listen to Liz's praises of her. Liz was fond of her and found comfort in her. The days when the respectable grey pony stopped in his respectable jog-trot on the roadside before the gate had a kind of pleasurable excitement in them. They were the sole spice of her life. She understood Annice as little as she understood Joan, but she liked her. She had a vague fancy that in some way Annice was like Joan, that there was the same strength in her, a strength upon which she herself might depend. And then she found even a stronger attraction in her visitor's personal adornments, in her graceful dress, in any elegant trifle she wore. She liked to look at her clothes and ask questions about them, and wonder how she would look if she were the possessor of such beautiful things. She were like a picture, she would say mournfully to Joan. She had a blue gown on, and a hat with bluebells in it, and somewhat white and soft frilled up round her neck. It were pretty. I wish I were a lady. I dunna see why everybody canna be a lady and have such like. Later Joan got up and went to the child, who lay upon the bed in a corner of the room. There were thoughts at work within her, of which Liz knew nothing. Liz only looked at her wondering, as she took the sleeping baby in her arms and began to pace the floor, walking to and fro with a slow step. "Have I set out to vex you?" said Liz. "No, lass," was the answer. "It isna thee as worrits me. I can scarce tell what it is mysen, but it isna thee, never fear." But there was a shadow upon her all the rest of the night. She did not lay the child down again, but carried it in her arms until they went to bed, and even then it lay upon her breast. "It's queer to me as you should be so fond of that child, Joan," said Liz, standing by the side of the bed. Joan raised her head from the pillow and looked down at the small face resting upon her bosom, and she touched the baby's cheek lightly with her finger, flushing curiously. "It's queer to me too," she answered. "Get thee into bed, Liz." Many a passionate battle was fought upon that hard, homely couch, when Liz was slumbering quietly, and the child's soft regular breathing was the only sound to be heard in the darkened room. Night after night Joan Lowrie lay with wide-opened eyes, silent, full of stubborn pangs of misery and shame. Amid the sordid cares and humiliations of her rough life, there had arisen new ones. She had secret strugglings of her own, secret yearnings, and added to these a secret terror. When she lay awake thinking, she was listening for her father's step. There was not a night in which she did not long for and dread to hear it. If he stayed out all night, she went down to her work under a load of foreboding. She feared to look into the faces of her workfellows, lest they should have some evil story to tell. She feared the road over which she had to pass, lest at some point its very dust should cry out to her in a dark stain. She knew her father better than the oldest of his companions, and she watched him closely. "He's what you wenches 'ud call a handsome chap, that there," said Lowrie to her the night of his encounter with Derek. "He's a tall chap and a strapping chap, and he's getting a good-looking mug of his own. But," clenching his fist slowly and speaking, "I've not done wi' him yet. I has not quite done wi' him. Wait till I have, and then see what you'll say about his beauty. Look you here, lass," more slowly and heavily still, "he'll no be so tall then, nor yet so straight and strapping. I'll smash his good-looking mug if I'm done to hell for it. Heed thou that." Having beaten his enemy with his own weapons, Derek determined to face him down, even should the worst come to the worst. So instead of taking lodgings near a town or avoiding the Knoll road, as Grace advised him to do when he heard of Joan's warning, he provided himself with a heavy stick stuck a pistol into his belt every night when he left his office, and walked home as usual, keeping a sharp lookout, however. "If I avoid the fellow," he said to Grace, "he will suspect at once that I feel I have cause to fear him, and if I give him grounds for such a belief as that, I might as well have given way at first. He will respect brute courage and brute force, though he has respect for nothing else." Strange to say, he was not molested. The excitement seemed to die a natural death in the course of a few days. Lowrie came back to his work looking sullen and hard, but he made no open threats, and he even seemed easier to manage. Certainly Derek found his companions more respectful and submissive. There was less grumbling among them, and more passive obedience. The rules were not broken openly, at least, and he himself was not defied. It was not pleasant to feel that what reason and civility could not do, a tussle had accomplished, but this really seemed to be the truth of the matter, and the result was one which made his responsibilities easier to bear. But during his lonely walks homeward on these summer nights, Derek made a curious discovery. On one or two occasions he became conscious that he had a companion who seemed to act as his escort. It was usually upon dark or unpleasant nights that he observed this, and the first time he caught sight of the figure, which always walked on the opposite side of the road, either some distance before or behind him, he put his hand to his belt, not perceiving for some moments that it was not a man but a woman. It was a woman's figure, and the knowledge sent the blood to his heart with a rush that quickened its beatings. It might have been chance, he argued, that took her home that night at this particular time, but when, time after time, the same thing occurred, he saw that his argument had lost its plausibility. It was no accident. There was purpose in it, and though they never spoke to each other, or in any manner acknowledged each other's presence, and though often he fancied that she convinced herself that he was not aware of her motive, he knew that Joan's desire to protect him had brought her there. He did not speak of this even to Grace. One afternoon, in making her visit at the cottage, Anise left a message for Joan. She had brought a little plant pot holding a tiny rose bush in full bloom, and when she went away she left her message with Les. "I never see your friend when I am here," she said. "Will you ask her to come and see me some night when she is not too tired?" When Joan came home from her work, the first thing that caught her eye was a lovely bit of colour, the little rose bush blooming on the window-sill where her niece herself had placed it. She went and stood before it, and when Liz, who had been temporarily absent, came into the room, she was standing before it still. "She brought it," explained Liz. "She were here this afternoon." "Aye," she answered. "Were she?" "Aye," said Liz. "And Joan, what do you think? She told me to tell you." Joan shook her head. "Why, she said if I were to tell you to go and see her some night when you were tired, just the same as if you were a lady. Shall you go?" "I dunno know," said Joan, awakening. "I cannot tell. What does she want of me?" "She wants to see thee and talk to thee, that's what," answered Liz. "Just the same as if thou was a lady, I tell thee. That's her way of doing things. She isn't a bit like rest of gentlefolk. Why, she'll sit there on that three-legged stool with child on her knee, and laugh and talk to me and it, as if she were nowt but a common lass, and noan a lady at all. She's ta'en a great fancy to thee, Joan. She's always asking me about thee. If I were thee, I'd go. Happen she'd give thee some of her old clothes, as she's taken to thee so." "I dunna want no old clothes," said Joan brusquely, "and she's no one so daft as to offer 'em to me." "Well, I never did," exclaimed Liz. "Wouldna tha tak 'em? Tha never means to say tha wouldna tak 'em, Joan. Tha'rt a queer wench. Why, I'd be set up for the rest of me days if she'd offer 'em to me." "Thy ways and mine isn't alike," said Joan. "I want no gentlefolk's finery, and I tell you, She wouldn't offer 'em to me." Liz regarded her almost impatiently. "I niver can make thee out," she said in a fret. "Thou'rt as grand as if there were a lady, thysen. Thou'lt take nowt for nobody." "Where's the child?" asked Joan. "She's laid on bed," said Liz. "She was so heavy she'd tire me out, and I give her a rosebud to play with and left her. She hasna cried since. But these is a nice colour," bending her pretty large-eyed face over the flowers and inhaling their perfume. "I wish I had a bit of ribbon like 'em."